So your baby's born. Now what? They've got to have somewhere to go during the day. Babies are notoriously not self-sufficient. So after maternity leave, where are you supposed to leave your precious bundle of joy? In this video, we're going to go over 3 common forms of childcare. Because since in America, we don't have the best social safety net. So moms have to shell out for the village that many other countries' governments provide. In this video, we'll be talking about au pairs, nannies, and daycare. Here's a deep dive into the 3 common forms of childcare that you find here in the United States. First, I'm going to take you through what each option actually is, where to find the particular form of childcare, and then we'll actually go into the deep dives of the pros and cons of each childcare option. And trust me, I think you'll be surprised at some of my findings. Personally, I'll reveal what we do at the very end of this video. All right, let's dive in. Starting with the most affordable option, let's talk about daycare. Daycare, at least in my city, runs around $2,000 a month for essentially 5 days a week of childcare, starting anywhere between 7 a.m. and ending at around 6 or 6:30 p.m., depending on the facility. This is very affordable because it offers parents the ability to leave their children somewhere safe and secure for an entire day, before work and after work. This is really helpful, especially for working moms and dads who need some buffer room between getting to work and coming back from the job. Daycares can be particularly difficult to find, especially for infants. In fact, I spoke to a local daycare that told me that their 2 sister schools were already fully booked for infants through 2026. They had only 4 spots available until May of 2025, many of which were already being filled. So it's very critical that if you know that you're going to want to do daycare, that you get your infant enrolled while you're pregnant. Oftentimes, daycares can have 6 months to 2-year waiting lists. Also, since daycares are hyper-local, you may or may not find the daycare option in your city that works best for you and your family. If you're seeking certain types of amenities and certain types of services from your daycare, daycare options can be limited depending on your geographic location. Let's run through some of the major things that daycare can offer for your child. Daycare staff is a critical pro. Because daycares often hire people with degrees in early childhood development, these folks are uniquely qualified to nurture and develop your child in the proper ways. They often prepare children for kindergarten and even first grade at a level that is greater than what you may find with a private nanny and especially with an au pair. This level of qualification is very difficult to come by with any type of affordability without sharing the cost with other kids. Daycare staff is one of the biggest pros I would recommend if you're going to go the route of daycare. Daycare offers socialization with your child's peers. Often, kids are grouped into cohorts with other kids their age. They're able to do crafts, sing, dance, and play with other children who are in similar developmental stages. I'm not sure how much this is really a pro though. Research has actually shown that most kids before the age of 4 and 5 don't really understand the nature of friendships. And while they might have a ton of fun playing around with their favorite person at daycare, not all kids are going to come out of daycare with their BFFs for life. So the socialization aspect to me is something that can be fulfilled in other avenues besides daycare. Another pro of daycare is that these centers are regulated facilities. They are routinely monitored by your local municipality to ensure that they're following all state and federal regulations for childcare facilities. This is really important because you want to make sure that your kids are somewhere safe. And I do think that having a certain level of oversight from the government does provide an incentive for these childcare centers to be on their best behaviors. That being said, we have all heard about the horror stories, and different different childcare centers have very, very different levels of security, very different levels of background checks for staff. And so it's really critical that you ask questions, tons of questions, before sending your child to the local daycare. For example, at my local daycare here in Sandy Springs, Georgia, they don't actually allow cameras in the classrooms. They also allow their staff to change the babies because the babies are there all day. They've got to be changed. These are two things that you can find variations of. In many daycares, they will allow cameras in the classroom, and they might even provide you with an app that allows you to watch your child in play all day. At others, they don't allow the staff to actually change the children. These tend to be daycares where you're only leaving your child there for a few hours at a time, and not centers that provide all-day care. That being said, you have to really understand what you as a parent are comfortable with and what you want to expose your children to. I think that there are no right or wrong answers here, because if you find a facility that you feel you can trust, then you've got to go with your gut. If you feel a little bit sketchy about a facility that you've toured, then just don't send your child there and try to find a different option. This is kind of where the problem with daycare lies, is that sometimes there is no other option, and the local daycare doesn't meet all of your custom requirements or bespoke yearnings for your child. And so that's where the other two methods of childcare will come into play. Some parents find that with daycare, the schedules are just way too rigid. Many daycares require that you drop your children off in a certain time frame and pick them up by a certain time frame. Some even restrict the number of hours that you can leave your child there to, let's say, 6 or 8 hours per day, depending on what you're paying in tuition. At many daycares, though, you're allowed to leave your child there for as long as the facility is actually open. Again, these are highly localized facilities, and each of them has very, very different rules, and you should inquire with them as to what their hours policies are. Just be aware that these hours can really affect the price per hour of your child care. If you're paying $2,000 a month tuition and you're only allowed to leave your child there 3 days a week for 4 hours a day, your cost per hour is actually significantly higher at a daycare than it would be with, say, a personal nanny. So it's really important that you assess how many hours of childcare you're actually getting for the price of tuition. Another con that many second-time moms know about daycare is the fact that germs spread like wildfire in these facilities. Most of my friends with kids who are toddlers and above remember the days of kids coming home sick from daycare almost on a weekly basis. That's because in many of these daycares, parents are desperate for childcare. And so if they've got to go to work, they will just leave their kids there if they've got a slight cold or a low-grade fever. Some daycares do require temperature checks every single morning before the child can enter the facility, and some don't. Again, it's highly dependent on the facility that you're touring. In any case, with vaccinations dropping and with certain diseases and such on the rise, this can be really scary and challenging for a parent to consider. Being sick is not fun, and when a little one catches a cold, it typically means that the rest of the household is going to be sick that week. Lastly, you can't control other kids. Kids are by nature unpredictable, and so biting, hitting, scratching, and other such behavior is to be expected from other kids learning about boundaries, sharing, and how to be good playmates. And I think this is another variable that many parents have to consider. Are you okay exposing your child to other children who may or may not have the same behavioral level of sophistication as your child? Or maybe you learn that your child is the problem one and you routinely get called in to ensure that your child's behavior is adjusted. Again, these are all kids, and we can't blame kids for, well, not knowing social etiquette. And so this is, again, a variable that you have to decide as a parent if you're willing to deal with in a daycare. Let's talk au pairs. For many families, the term au pair seems like a very high-end, very expensive form of childcare. I don't know, maybe it's because we're American and we think all French words sound fancy. But au pairs can actually be a very affordable form of childcare, especially if you have more than one child. Au pairs are typically on the younger side and they vary in terms of their experience with children. Some have never watched children before, some have been babysitting or even work in kindergartens in their home countries. So the level of experience varies widely amongst au pairs. Au pairs are a live-in childcare option. You must have an extra bedroom if you would like to work with an au pair, because the agency that will typically find an au pair for you will actually inspect the room where the au pair will be staying. Often, many au pairs also would like access to a vehicle, whether it's your vehicle that they share or, in many cases, their own. And so having an additional car is often a huge benefit and will allow you to match with higher quality au pairs. In addition to board and potentially a car, you're also expected to ensure that your au pair is eating. You are expected to pay for all of the au pair's food. Often this just means buying extra groceries, but sometimes it can mean accommodating a specific diet, such as kosher or halal, or even allergies like peanuts or avocado allergies. So it's really critical that you talk to your au pair about what their expectations are before they arrive at your house. Au pairs are allowed to offer 45 hours per week of childcare. You are not allowed to work them any more than 45 hours. That's actually a, State Department rule, but it's basically a limit that has been set by the government for their J-1 visas. So the max number of hours you can work them is 45 hours. You are also expected to pay the full amount of their stipend, which is around $195 per week, even if they only work 10 hours. So their stipend cannot be prorated. Most of the time, au pairs are with an agency. We use Childcare, and I'll provide our referral link below so that you can get a discount if you decide to go with the au pair option. And these agencies do charge a fee above the stipend. The total cost of an au pair will run you around $18,000 in actual cash, plus the room, plus food, plus any expenses related to the car. For example, their insurance. You can negotiate with your au pair whether you pay for gas, whether you increase their stipend each week, and other incidentals. If you decide to have your au pair travel with you, you will also need to pay for your au pair's flight, as well as an additional room for your au pair. They must always have their own room, even when traveling. And this makes sense, right? It's for their safety and comfort, as well as for separation of work and your family life. Many people don't talk about the hidden costs of an au pair. I remember I was talking to a friend who mentioned this to me, and I said, well, how bad could it be? But realistically, you are also paying for other things like their phones in many cases, if you want them to have an American phone instead of using WhatsApp and Wi-Fi everywhere. And most parents, I would say, do want the person watching their kids to have a good cell phone plan. You're also probably increasing your electric costs, probably increasing other costs around your household, considering somebody is always home. However, if you do the math, this is a really wonderful option for parents who work and want the flexibility of changing hours on a week-to-week basis, which is something that a daycare cannot provide. Au pairs can work nights, during the day, on weekends, really any schedule that you set, as long as you provide that schedule around a week in advance. So au pairs really do offer families the flexibility to be able to have childcare on demand. It's kind of like having a nanny, but with a lot less experience. One other really great thing about the au pair program is that you're able to pay one au pair to watch 2 or even 3 children. Your level of comfort with doing this is totally up to you and your family, but for many families, they feel like one au pair can absolutely handle 2 kids all day. And so at this point, the au pair option actually becomes less expensive than daycare. So instead of paying $2,000 for 2 kids or $4,000 a month in daycare, you can pay the au pair around $18,000 a year. That would include her stipend plus the agency fees. And that provides you with a really, really affordable option, especially for parents who have more than one child. Now, I have heard of some folks who have 2 au pairs because they have 3 or even 4 kids. And again, this is still a really affordable option when you consider that daycare will charge you per child. One of the greatest benefits of working with an au pair is the cultural exchange. I have actually had a French au pair who has worked with my baby, and I love walking into the room and listening to her speak French to my daughter, knowing that my daughter is going to absorb that language as she grows up. So there are certainly benefits to being able to exchange language, exchange culture, and exchange heritage with other countries. Another big deal is that my daughter is going to be exposed to the world before she's old enough to really understand what that even means. I've always wanted my daughter to grow up in a multicultural household and to have friends from all over the world and from all different walks of life. And the au pair program really allows you to introduce your children to something very different from your family dynamic, even from infancy. Now, the au pair program is great, but there are certainly some drawbacks. The first of which is sometimes it doesn't always work out. I've actually gone into a rematch with an au pair where we both decided it really wasn't a great fit. And sometimes the reasons are totally innocuous, and other times it could be like a real clash between the au pair and your family. Luckily, in my situation, we had a wonderful transition period and there was never any bad blood. But I can imagine that if you had an au pair where you had a falling out, the agencies typically require that the host family keep that au pair in the home for 2 weeks, which can be pretty awkward if you're not on speaking terms. So that is one potential drawback. Another drawback is that au pairs typically stay in the country for about 1 year. With au pairs from certain countries, they're actually able to renew for a second year, but in their second year, unless they go back home to renew their J1 visa, they won't be able to travel with you. So there's constantly turnover with au pairs, and you never know what you're gonna get. They're not a long-term solution, but if you are an adventurous family that loves welcoming new people into your fold every single year or 2 years, then au pairs are a great option for you. The last drawback would just be that you have an additional roommate. For some families, they really value their privacy and they don't want someone living with them. If that's you, then au pairs really aren't for you, because as a host, you are expected to bring an au pair into your household, not just to work for you, but for them to have an amazing experience with a host family in the US. When your au pair first arrives, it can be a very difficult transition period. They first have to really start to learn your family, how you guys operate, your personalities, and often their English isn't the best. So you really have to be patient. Also, you as the host family will typically have to help them navigate our wonderful government, especially the Social Security Administration. You'll be expected to help them get their Social Security cards, their driver's licenses, their bank accounts, and otherwise make sure that they're set up to live for a year within the US. For many families, this can be really challenging, especially if both parents are already back at work. When do you find time to accommodate all of these paperworky tasks? And the last form of childcare we'll talk about are nannies. The nanny has been made famous by films such as Mary Poppins. And let me tell you, if Mary Poppins was real, she'd break the bank. Nanny pay ranges from $15 per hour all the way to $50 or $100 plus, depending on the quality of education of the nanny in conjunction with the role of the nanny and your family's expectations. Many nannies today have very strict contracts that might include things like guaranteed hours. This means that even if you don't need your nanny 1 week, you're still paying regardless of whether your nanny shows up for work or not. Other nanny stipulations might include paid time off and certain types of insurances that you need to maintain as a household. If you are paying your nanny properly, your nanny is a W-2 employee, which means that you'll also have to pay payroll taxes in addition to your nanny's actual pay. This can be, around 26% of your nanny's actual pay on top of their pay. However, nannies offer the fullest range of flexibility for a family. You can find a nanny that does exactly what you want for your family. If you want a nanny who can sing to your baby and has the voice of an angel, then you can interview for that skill. If you want a nanny who is fluent in 5 languages, you can interview for those sets of skills. If you want a nanny who reminds you of someone from your past, you can also find that person. You're able to really tailor your nanny experience to exactly what your family needs are. I will say that we have worked with both a night nanny as well as a day nanny, and we have loved both experiences. Our night nanny was the single biggest pro tip for having a baby, and I recommend all parents who can afford it, especially on their first baby, to work with a night nanny. But our day nanny is also fantastic. She has built such an incredible bond with our daughter. She speaks 2 languages, and we've even become friends with her family. So with a nanny, you're really able to build a bond and build a relationship that could last for as long as you are in a working relationship together. We see our nanny as a long-term fit through all of our kids, and even when we talk about family planning, we typically bring her into those discussions. Nannies can be an amazing, amazing partner to you and your family as you decide to take your children on various journeys throughout life, whether that is their infancy or starting school or even their travels. We love our nanny, but this is certainly the least affordable option. Nannies are great because they give your kids personal attention. They're often in your home, which means that you know that they're safe and you can set all of the security measures that you feel comfortable with. For example, we have cameras all over our house. They're not necessarily nanny cams. They're actually to help out with my elderly grandma and our 5 disabled dogs, but they also provide me with a certain sense of relief knowing that at any time I can check out the cameras if I feel the need to. You are able to set the tone for how you work with your nanny, and that level of customization can be critical for some families. Moreover, you're able to background check your nanny to the degree that you want. For us, we ran an FBI level background check on our nanny to ensure that she had not committed any violent crimes or any sexual crimes especially, and that gave me a really nice level of comfort. Of course, you can also check your nanny's references as well as their educational credits. Another point of flexibility for nannies is that they could be live-in or live-out. Our nanny is a live-out nanny, although we have told her that she is welcome to move in anytime she wants. One of the things that's really special about that is that you get to decide the level of interaction with your nanny after and before working hours. For us, we're happy to have her here anytime, and she even has access to our door. She's able to open our door with her fingerprint anytime. That's the level of trust that we have in her. But if you're the kind of family that values more privacy, then you can also set that type of boundary with your nanny. One of the potential cons of having a nanny is that when that nanny is sick, you don't have childcare. So having a backup nanny or a temp service for many people just isn't realistic or really wanted. And so if your nanny calls out sick, that could be a problem. Now, I haven't found this to be an issue because our nanny has been really, really reliable over the last 6 months. But for some families, this could be a potential threat to the workday or to the overall flow flow of the family in any given day. For some families, they'll wonder where their kid is going to become socialized. For me, I'm not too concerned with socialization. I know that my daughter is surrounded by tons of people who love her, and just because those people happen to be adults doesn't mean that she's not becoming socialized. In fact, I like the fact that my daughter isn't learning behaviors that I wouldn't want her to repeat from other kids. And so for me, her not being socialized at 6 months isn't a big deal. But I do have a recommendation for moms who do want that socialization. At many gyms, for example, Lifetime Fitness in Atlanta, the gym actually offers a certain number of hours of daycare per day. And so if you are a member of a gym, you might check if they have childcare services, and you could make friends with a group of moms where you bring your child at the same time every day or a few times a week, and your child can be exposed to other kids in that environment. That to me makes a little bit more sense if you really are looking for that socialization aspect than going full-time into daycare if that's not the method of childcare that works for you. I've never thought that socialization would be the reason to decide on one form of childcare over another. And this is a shout out to Lifetime. For just $60 a month, I get access to up to 2 hours per day in their childcare facilities. This is also great because if I want to go work out when our nanny's not on, it's really nice to know that I can just throw her in her car seat and take her over to daycare. Now, of course, you do have to make a reservation if they're under 1 year old, but for me, that's never been an issue. So again, how much your nanny costs is totally dependent on a number of different factors. But I recommend using a site like care.com to vet nannies and to find a number of different qualified individuals that will work for your family. Care.com does actually have a fee associated with it, so you can purchase a monthly subscription, a quarterly subscription, or a yearly subscription, and that allows you to browse the profiles of several childcare providers. Care also offers other types of providers, for example, caregivers for the elderly, housekeepers, pet sitters. So I actually think that the subscription is worth it. This also might be a solution to the problem that we discussed earlier about having backup care available. If you find a provider who you really like, but maybe is your second choice, that might be a great person to keep in mind as backup care if your nanny ever goes on vacation or gets sick. So those are some really common forms of childcare. And the way that your family decides is going to depend on a matrix of factors. For example, your budget, your propensity to have people living in your home, your yearning for cultural engagement, and a variety of other things. I personally have found that nannies and au pairs work for me. We're currently working with an amazing nanny, and we do plan to bring on an au pair to assist her once we have more children. So for us, that is our preferred form of childcare. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and I hope to keep bringing you content that is useful, especially for moms who want to elevate their motherhood experience.